The Hartwell home had a certain dignity about it. Ivy climbing up its stone walls, sunlit windows framed by polished wood, and an air that whispered, "We've been here for generations." Inside, the corridors smelled faintly of cedar and old books, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors watched over the living room like silent judges. 18-year-old Clara Hartwell stood at the edge of the dining table that evening, her fingers stained with paint from the afternoon's work. She tried to hide them under the tablecloth. Across from her sat her father, Charles Hartwell, posture sharp as a blade, his crisp white shirt spotless, his gaze fixed on her like a man taking aim. Her mother, Margaret, graceful but always a little on edge, poured wine for him and tea for herself. To them, Clara was the final chapter in the Hartwell legacy. Destined to be a lawyer, to marry well, to keep the family name as polished as the silver cutlery. What they didn't know, or perhaps refused to accept, was that Clara's soul belonged to the world of colors, brushstrokes, and canvases. There had been whispers in the house lately, the kind carried in hushed tones down hallways when they thought she wasn't listening. Something about bills, about the roof that needed fixing, about a loan Charles had taken that wasn't paying off. But in the Hartwell home, pride was stitched into the wallpaper. Nobody admitted weakness. It happened over roasted lamb and green beans. Clara's acceptance letter to the Whitfield Institute of Art lay folded in her lap, the paper warm from her trembling hands. "I got in," she said finally, her voice small but steady. "In where?" Charles didn't look up from carving his meat. "The Whitfield Institute." That name hit the table like a dropped glass. Charles looked up sharply. "That's the art school." "Yes." He set down his knife with the deliberate slowness of a man containing his temper. "We agreed you'd attend Blackwell Law. That's the deal." "It wasn't a deal, Father. It was your decision." "You're throwing away your future for painting, Clara." His voice rose, echoing against the high ceiling. Margaret tried to soften the edges. "Darling, think of stability." "I have thought of it," Clara said, her eyes burning now. "But my life can't just be about stability. You need to grow up," Charles cut in. His voice, cold now, carried finality. "If you walk out of here to chase this hobby, don't bother coming back until you've come to your senses." It was the kind of sentence that can't be unsaid. Clara went upstairs, packed a duffel bag with clothes and brushes, and walked out the front door. Her father didn't follow. The city didn't welcome her so much as tolerate her. Her apartment was the size of her old bedroom's closet, with a window that faced a brick wall. She worked the morning shift at a cafe, pulling espresso shots until her hands smelled of burnt coffee grounds, then came home to paint in the thin, flickering light of a single desk lamp. Some nights, she fell asleep still holding her brush. Every gallery she approached sent her away with polite but crushing rejections. "Too unconventional," one curator said. "We're looking for something more commercial," another explained, as though her art were a defective product. The only comfort came in phone calls from Ethan, her 15-year-old brother, who whispered updates into the receiver. "Dad's pretending everything's fine, but I heard Mom crying last night. The bank's been calling." Clara kept working, kept painting, kept hoping. Winter bit harder in the city, the cold settling into her bones as though it meant to stay. She learned to stretch cans of soup across 3 days, and she stopped turning on the heat. Her paints ran low. So did her will. It was on one particularly gray afternoon, while sketching customers during her cafe shift, that she noticed a woman staring at her from the corner table. She was in her 60s, dressed in layers of silk scarves and gold bangles that jingled when she moved. "You draw like someone who remembers more than they've lived," the woman said, peering over Clara's shoulder. Her name was Madame Beatrice Laurent, an art dealer with an eye for the unusual. She asked to see more of Clara's work. When Clara hesitated, embarrassed by her tiny, paint-splattered apartment, Beatrice smiled. "Darling, genius lives in worse places than this." For the first time in months, Clara felt fire in her chest again. Beatrice's words had been oxygen. She decided her next piece wouldn't be just a painting. It would be her soul on canvas. She began a massive work, taller than she was, of the Hartwell home. She painted it as it was, with ivy climbing like green veins up its tired walls, but also as she felt it, warm light spilling from windows, the front porch bathed in golden dusk, a hint of nostalgia in every shadow. She painted for weeks, barely eating, losing track of days. And when she was done, the house stared back at her from the canvas. A home she'd lost, and a home she'd never stopped loving. Beatrice saw it and went silent for a long time before finally saying, "This will change your life. I'll get it in the winter auction." The winter auction was a glittering affair. Gowns, champagne, and the kind of people who could spend a fortune on a single painting without blinking. Clara stood in the back, her heart pounding in her throat. The bidding began at $50,000. It was more than she'd ever imagined, but the numbers kept climbing. A tall man in a navy suit lifted his paddle. Then a woman in pearls countered. The room became electric. 1 million, the auctioneer called. The paddles kept rising. 2 million. Clara's breath hitched. Finally, the man in navy said, 3.2 million. The gavel came down. Applause filled the room, but Clara heard only the rush of her own heartbeat. A week later, Clara stood on the Hartwell porch. The same ivy climbed the same walls, but now the place looked weary, as though it had aged alongside her family's troubles. Charles opened the door, thinner, his suit hanging loosely on him. He froze when he saw her. "I came to give you this," she said, holding out the check. "The house stays yours." He stared at it, then at her. His lips parted, but no words came. Finally, his voice broke. "Clara, I'm sorry." They stood in the doorway for a long time before he stepped forward and hugged her. Awkwardly at first, then tightly, like a man afraid she might disappear again. 1 year later, the Hartwell home looked alive again. The roof fixed, the walls painted, the garden blooming. Above the fireplace hung Clara's masterpiece, its colors rich and defiant. Visitors would stop and stare, marveling at the detail. But for Charles Hartwell, it wasn't just a painting. It was an apology he would never stop giving, and a love he'd almost lost forever. And for Clara, it was proof that sometimes, following your heart can bring you home in ways you never expected.